All right, thank you, Mr. Gunpowell. So I'm going to cover the end of the year report for last fiscal year, which obviously we're a little late. Normally we'd give this to the board in August timeframe, but we were just busy. We got behind, and district engineer said, okay, this is a perfect opportunity for us to give it to you, and then that'll lead into the quarterly updates for our current project. So we just finished the second quarter, December 31st, so I can give you that update as well. So, so this is meant to be interactive, so if you have any questions, stop me, ask. This is just gonna have a spreadsheet that I'm gonna show up on the screen. If you wanna follow along, it's up to you, but it'll all be here
Probably
on the
easier
screen.
on the screen, to be honest.
Yeah. So like I said, I'm going to do a summary of our end of the year report for last fiscal year, talk a little bit about projects we completed last fiscal year, and then dovetail into our current projects that we're working on, CIP projects we're working on now. So that spreadsheet, like I said, a lot of numbers, a lot of categories. What I wanted to focus on here is just the contract amount, $1.17 million. So that's just the snapshot in time at the end of the fiscal year. How many construction projects do we have on the books? Last fiscal year, just so you know, we were doing a lot of design at the beginning of the fiscal year. Had a couple projects we were doing, and then it really wasn't until the spring into the fiscal year that we initiated a lot more of our construction projects that we're actually now in this fiscal year currently building. So it just kind of worked out that way, and it's sort of a ebb and flow between design, construction,
So you'll probably see that number go up. You will see that number go up significantly when you get the end of the year next August or so. You know, for the 18-19.
Yeah. So we had a slight increase from the previous fiscal year. The previous fiscal year we had 1.1, so we bumped that up a little bit this last fiscal year. So the other thing in this spreadsheet that we track, and this is a tracking tool that we use just to check ourselves, our own metrics, kind of see how we're doing historically and all. But we also track our monthly projected invoices versus actual. And this is just sort of an accounting tool that we use to coordinate with the finance department for big payments. It's really only critical with large construction projects. We haven't had some of those, big $10, $20 million jobs in a while. But we still track this if for some reason there's questions or, again, coordination with finance.
As you can imagine, when we're doing the treatment plant upgrade and the 40 million gallon tank, this is very important to the finance department because with millions of dollars in checks going out monthly.
Yeah.
The two things that jump out at me are, three. The actual monthly, the 99,655 versus the projected.
Right. So for whatever reason, this is amalgamated for all the projects, but we must have expected that money to be being billed later on, and for whatever reasons it was billed sooner. Or this could have been some retention from a previous job. As you know, we pay retention 60 days later, so there's always a lag in projects. So at the end we expected to spend $613. We ended up spending less than that for the fiscal year. So not a huge difference, but just kind of month to month, kind of see where we're at. Okay, so the other thing that we look at on the spreadsheet as we're tracking the projects is our change orders. So again, a snapshot in time, but on June 30th of last fiscal year, we had 3 change orders for our number of projects that we had, totaling a little under $21,000. That gave us a change order percentage of 1.78%. We had several projects we were building, but our lift station 1 wet well repairs, we had less than $1,000 change order. That was a final number. And then on our north and south pressure reducing station, at that time we had $20,000 in change orders. That project continued on into this fiscal year, and so that number changed, and that number actually ended up coming down. But this, again, it's just a snapshot. But we kind of look at that and we compare that to the industry standard of 8 to 10% for construction projects. We do have an ordinance that we look at for board action, 7.5 to 10%. We kind of compare that to our 1.78% and say, okay, we're doing pretty good in the industry. And I feel that that's really attributed to our engineering staff, our inspectors in the field, and just how we manage the projects. So we can kind of look at this again from a historical perspective. in last fiscal year. How are we doing compared to the average? If we look at the last 12 years, how are we doing? Again, obviously, last year was not a heavy construction project, so you kind of have to, there's a lot in the weeds here and a lot of interpretation in the numbers, but at least gives us a gauge. How are we doing on average? We're definitely below our average, certainly in percentage, and that should kind of evaluate things a little bit. And we've been tracking well if you look at the last 4 or 5 years, you know, less than 2%, -%, 0.5%. So we had an anomaly in the year 16-17. I don't know if you remember that, but that was when we were redoing the filters at the treatment plant. And in that, we ended up discovering some coding issues, which created, that project was an opportunity to fix those coding. Even though it's almost like an entirely new project, it bumped our numbers way up, but there's a lot of details within the details. But again, it's a gauge.
And you can also see from starting back from 07, the total construction, which is the top line underneath the year. You see even in the big years, 2008, 2009, $40 million in contracts, and our change order percentages through. So it ranges through the recession where we had very little construction, like 11, 12, right at the post-recession, where we had only 164,000, and then you can see how the ebb and flow is. And again, Jason, has been here and he's pointed out in the last 4 or 5 years since he's been here, the numbers have been very good. But historically, it's been very good for since actually before 07, but we started tracking it in 07, 06, 07.
And James likes to really tout that $40 million in contracts, he still had less than 5%. It's hard for me to match that because we just don't have $40 million jobs happening.
That's my comeback when he says, look at my change order percentage.
Whenever I say I'm doing a great job, he says, yeah, but back then. No pat on the backs.
Good job, guys.
That's right. So again, historical perspective, when we look at all our jobs of the last 12 years, how much money we've spent, we look at our change order percentage relative to the industry standard, and we can actually put a dollar figure on how much money have we saved the district over that life of those projects, $3.4 million. So again, there's a lot of details here, there's a lot of ways you can interpret it, but it's just a good sort of gauge on how we're doing. So the last thing on the spreadsheet I wanted to highlight is we also track our contracts, our outside contracts, that money that we're spending hiring our consultants, and how are we doing with that. So that spreadsheet kind of breaks down into 2 portions, and one is these top 3 categories. We break it down into our planning and design consultants, our CM and inspection consultants, and then sort of our catch-all, our geologists, our environmentalists, our right-of-way acquisition. How much do we have in contracts? We had $2.1 million in design contracts. We were about 80% paid out. Again, not a heavy construction year, so we only had about $15,000 in CM. We only had about 18% of that paid out. And again, snapshot, how are we doing? Are we closing those contracts out? And this rolls up into a summary. When I and my staff look at it, that spreadsheet's this wide and it's got all these projects, and we can really look into the details, but that's too much information to disseminate in these kind of meetings. But again, it's just a gauge. We also track how much money we're spending for purchasing material, trying to save on some markup on some of these projects, or depending on the timing of these materials, and trying to get that material at a better rate for the district. And then also tracking reimbursements. So last year we had $287,000 in reimbursements. Again, that's just on the books. That's not that we actually got that money back. That's just what we were anticipating. And some of that was state money, Prop 84, and some of that was negotiated with the city of San Marcos on a few projects. So that's kind of the summary of all of our projects, and then I'm just going to switch over to a couple projects that we finished. So again, not a heavy year. We had 2 projects that we actually finished. We were doing other jobs, we just didn't actually wrap them up and finish them last fiscal year. So we had some repairs that we did to our lift station. That was accepted in October. We did a valve relocation that was accepted in March. They were both under budget. Doesn't always happen. We strive to make that happen, and in this case it worked, so happy about that. So some of the details of those projects, if you know where our lift station 1 is on San Marcos Boulevard, this is kind of a picture of the outside of the back of the building, and this aluminum door was installed a while ago to kind of close in that room. We added plumbed in a odor scrubber to kind of capture those noxious fugitive odors Those are very corrosive, and it ended up basically eating the inside of that room. So we needed a project to repair it. So this is, you can see corrosion and on the concrete floor, on the masonry block, the railing was starting to fall away, and that actually leads down into the wet well. It's a safety hazard. It's an issue for our operations staff. And this was the end result. New stainless steel railing, new coatings, protective coatings on all our surfaces. Again, the ceiling was getting eaten away. That metal deck was corroding. There was about 2 inches of concrete on the top of that. That's the entire ceiling. We ended up cleaning that up, welding a whole entire new corrugated deck, new support beams, coating it, and protecting it. So that project was completed. The other project was a valve relocation. We had 2 valves out in the street here, and we were kind of moving them out to make it more accessible for our operations staff, as well as one of the valves was non-functional, so we had to do it anyways. So instead of just replacing it, we did a relocation project. Not great photos, but one of the valves was very deep. It was in our easement, about 20 feet deep, and the other valve off of Red Wing had to be done at night, so there was a lot of coordination with operations staff to redirect flow.
And Jason, really quick, the important reason to redirect these valves is they're in the middle of Rancho Santa Fe Road. So anytime we had to operate them, you had to put major traffic control. It's a safety issue, and also add a lot of time, labor, and expense just to turn a valve.
Now you say the one valve was 20 feet deep?
This valve is 20 feet deep. Yeah, I couldn't get the full. But this is actually a valve can to turn it, and it's actually down here.
But you turn it down there, right?
Well, no, it has a valve stem.
Oh.
And so you operate it all on top.
I see.
But it's just really deep.
How tall is that shield?
That is, I believe, it's 2 8-foot shields stacked.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they usually come in 8-foot
Yeah,
section,
that's what
and
it
so I
is.
believe that's 16 feet you're looking at there, and then of course you can
Yeah, the
see
difference.
he's kind of cut himself in a bit
Yeah.
to make a pad. So yeah, it was definitely a safety issue. So that is the end of the year report. I can answer any questions you have on that, or I'll move right into the quarterly reports.
That's
what Hal was talking about.
Stem he was talking about.
Yep.
Yep.
You
And
thought there
that's
was
not
sewage
sewage,
up in there.
It's one of my favorite pictures. Is how many engineers does it take to steer a hole and find out what's going on? Any chance to poke fun at engineers, I like to do. So, okay, so that's the end of the year for last fiscal year. Yeah, any questions on how we were doing or tracking? Otherwise, I'll move into the quarterly reports for this fiscal year, which are all online. If you go online, we have this map, and anybody can click on these pins and pull up a report that gives a very detailed kind of summary of what was done, what we did that quarter, board action, progress, schedule, a little kind of a little map, and then any kind of financial data, whether we're in a design project, how much we've paid that consultant, or in a construction project, how we're doing in the construction contract with that contractor. I won't go through all of them, but I will just summarize what's there for you. So if you look at all those quarterlies, one that you don't have is the north and south pressure reducing stations, and those were 2 projects that were built as one. They were completed on the first fiscal year. So in the second quarter, they're off. So we adjust it every quarter. Projects come on, projects come off, just depending on where they're at. So that project was finished. It was accepted in September by the board, so that project is off this quarter. A new one that just got added was the North Twin Oaks tank refurbishment. That's a tank we have in the northern part of our district. Our tanks regularly need to be inspected and repaired. This is one that's due for service. The board approved a PO for our design consultant to begin that, putting those plans together, and that was accepted in December, and they're actually going in this month to look at that tank and make their evaluation and begin that process. Our sewer bypass repair, that project was bid out. We accepted bids this month. It was going to go to the board, but the price came in so well, it's actually under our 50,000 threshold. So we will do contracts, it'll go to the GM for signature, and we will move forward and do that repair. That repair is on our bypass line, that allows the district to flow sort of any of the sewage from downtown and the lake can get bypass the plant and go directly into the outfall. So that's what this line is used for. It's been off for a year. We've had this break, but we don't use it operationally regularly. It's nice to have. It's an emergency line. So we're finally getting around to making that repair.
That's the one off Brighton Glen, just west of
Yeah,
Rancho, kind of thing.
and while emergency repair work usually costs more money, we always evaluate the work. Can it wait? And this was a repair that, after we initially determined it was failing, we said, okay, it can wait. We can budget this. We can get a better price, and then we can schedule the work, and that's what we're doing. So, Stargaze Court River Run Circle Waterline Rehabilitation. That was a project that we began sort of late last fiscal year, finished up in the first quarter. Took a long time to negotiate with the contractor, some changes, some conditions, some deducts that we were looking for, and that was finally resolved, and we've paid them out, and this is going to be something that'll come off the list for the third quarter. The board accepted that project in November finally. Palos Vista Pump Station Electric Generator, that's a new project. So that's a generator that's being installed at the pump station. So in the event of an outage, the generator will be able to pump water up to the Palos Vista tank that feeds the Emerald Heights community. So this is a great project that operations been wanting to do for a while. There was a lot of state regulation and what kind of generator you could use, engines and all this. Finally was resolved. The board awarded that contract in November, and we're hoping to kick that off fairly soon. The Rock Springs Sewer Replacement Project, the board awarded the project to the contractor in August. We just began that project in October. That project was doing really well, and then we had these January rains. So we've had a delay, and we're trying to make some progress this week, and I just looked at the weather report. We got another 4 or 5 days of rain coming, I think starting Thursday. So this is a project that was doing great. We're having some rain delays, but in the end, it's still chugging along.
You also have to be
So-
aware when they're working down there in the trench at the bottom over by where the water flows. When it stops raining, it still takes another 2-3 days to dry that
Yeah.
construction site out.
Yeah. So let's see. This is one of our larger construction contracts. Actually, this is a little over $2 million. So this is one of our bigger jobs, and we've been working on it for a number of years. A lot of right-of-way acquisition, a lot of environmental issues. So it's taken a while to get this project off the ground. So we're happy that it's finally getting built. So the last on this list are these ones here. The gravity outfall project at the Montiel lift station. This is a project that Rob and I are working on. We're in the planning phase, and we just finished up the planning documents with Michael Baker, and we're trying to coordinate with the city of Escondido. This project is to get a gravity sewer underneath the 78 from our Montiel lift station into Escondido's system. And by doing that, we will be getting rid of 3 capital improvement projects: the replacement of the lift station, the replacement of a force main, and the upsize of a gravity line that force main dumps into. So if we can pull this off with the city of Escondido, it'll be a great win for the district. It's dependent on the city of Escondido coming to the table and helping pay for some of that. And Rob and I have been working with the consultant, and we've got a very good argument for them to do that. It's just whether they're willing to play ball or not. So again, it's just at the planning stage. We're hoping to move this into the design phase in the next 3 to 4 months. We'll see how that goes.
I'm hoping to have a no-go on that project by the end of this fiscal year. Ideally.
It would be nice to know where we're,
Yeah.
if we're going to move forward or not.
So what is the incentive for Escondido?
A lot of their existing system is under capacity today. So
And
they're going to have to upsize it at some point anyways. This is just a great mechanism for them to do it and for us to do it together. And we're really not putting that significant amount in. I'm trying to think, is it?
You talking about linear footage or money?
No, a flow.
Sewer flow.
Yeah, we're talking somewhere in the realm of about 100 gallons per minute
Yeah.
into their system there. So, like Mr. Hubbard was saying, their 8-inch infrastructure, it's not sized to handle their own flow in a few years as it is. We would be potentially accelerating their projects that they'd have to do anyway. So if we can offer to chip some money into which we'd like to do, it seems like we would both benefit from that.
Yeah, so we actually did the sewer modeling for their system, just to see if they would have the capacity. I don't think they even knew what kind of capacity they had or didn't
No.
have.
No, they didn't. They had a skeletonized model that their consultant did, which only looked like it only looked at the big pipes in their system, not all their individual collectors. So they had no idea.
So the next project, and this is a fairly large project that for this phase, the Interceptor Phase 2, we've been working on since 2013. The Interceptor we've been working on since the early 80s, I believe.
88
So
was
this
acronym.
is sort of the last phase of the Interceptor, unless we do another portion. But so the board approved an amendment to Kennedy Jenks' contract last month to redesign a portion of the project that was initiated by the city. That amount, $61,000 and change, something like that, will be fully reimbursed by the city. But it's just taken about a year and a half, 2 years, to get the city and us to sort of agree on that. So that project has really been delayed.
Is this the line that is parallel with San Marcos Boulevard?
It ends up paralleling San Marcos Boulevard at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, it comes through the creek, right?
Right,
And then
right.
it goes up. It's going to go up Tamarisk, and then come out on San Marcos Boulevard and go on San Marcos Boulevard underneath that culvert, that the Los Postas culvert,
Yeah.
that portion over there, by Pacific or whatever that road is.
So it was the city that wanted to realign it.
The city asked us to realign it to ease their development process under different management, and then they asked us to move the alignment again under new management, and then under current management they asked us to move it again. So right now we have a bill.
We've designed it a few times.
We have a bill
So is
into.
it back to an original location?
Yes,
Pretty much.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Yeah, so we basically have a bill into the city for the previous relocation work, which we're waiting on payment, and then this relocation work we wouldn't proceed until they agreed to pay for it, because they haven't paid for the first relocation work yet. So
So when I do bring this project to the board for award, you'll see a staff cost. Just want you to be aware that it's
Yeah.
we've redesigned it probably 3 or 4 times.
Three times the normal
Yeah.
staff cost.
yeah.
We can't get reimbursed for that, but we're getting reimbursed for our consultant fees.
Yeah.
And that was a huge win. General manager was involved in that process because the city, we really weren't getting anywhere for quite a long time. So we're finally past this big hurdle. I'm working with the consultant. We're hoping to have some new plans and be able to actually bid this out late spring, early summer, and finally get into construction. So that'll be a very large construction contract in the order of $4 million. So it'll be a large project. Our operations building expansion, I know that's near and dear to your heart because we brought this to you several times, and as we kind of redesigned it, made it better. That project has basically wrapped up, and we're in the punch list phase. And Jim, I don't know if you've dealt with the punch list, but sometimes that's the hardest part of the job. It's
Yeah.
built. I'm arguing with them to fix grouting and little things, replace a countertop that got scratched and little things like that. But we want the best product we can for what we paid. And so unfortunately that's where I'm at, and I'm holding back our operations staff. They want to get into
Yeah.
those
You wanna
locker
take
rooms.
possession, yeah.
And I'm like, no, I haven't accepted the job. So anyways, I'm hoping to bring that to the board in late February, but it's dependent on a lot of these little punch list things, getting them all buttoned up. So that's where we're at. Fulton Road and the NCT easement and the Laurel's lateral or subdivision project, those are 2 lining projects that we actually bid out as one. So there's 2 reports, but we bid that out as one contract. The board accepted that in November. That was a successful project, and that will come off the list. Schoolhouse tank, that's another tank refurbishment, and we are at the 90% level, 99% level, and I'm hoping to actually bid that out in a couple weeks once I button up the bid documents that I've been working with the consultant. So that's our list of projects that we're working on. Understand that this is a list of projects that are sort of our larger projects, our CIP projects. Of course, there's a lot of other little projects that don't make this list. A lot of things we're doing to support other staff, but these are the things that I think are noteworthy and worth bringing forward to you. So unless there's any questions on these particular projects, I will I will hand it over to Mr. Gumpel.
So, and also, just to be clear, anybody from the public could go to our website, go to the engineering page, click on, they'll see a
Yep.
map like that, they click on, they can hover above the bubble, and they would be able to pull up a general synopsis. Here, Jason will show you.
Yep.
Engineering capital,
Where's it?
active CIP projects. So you get a map, and then you can just hover above the bubble, or you could enlarge it.
Yeah,
You like to enlarge it?
I do like doing that.
Yep. So you kind of click on.
Let's see how Rock Springs is doing. Gives you a
And then-
description of the
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, and then if you click on the actual link, it opens up the full quarterly report. So
Oh, boy.
it's available to anybody in the public that wants
Mhm.
to know where we're going. It talks about our, the change orders, the quarterly
Yep.
update, outstanding issues, schedule, everything's there. And we've actually, I actually had made Jason check with a bunch of other agencies. And as far as from the transparency of what we put out there, it's above and beyond what other agencies put out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. All right.
That being said, there's just kind of dovetailing into level of efforts. So you've kind of seen the results, and basically the results is, we actively manage our jobs, and just a little bit of history. Jason has got experience as a consultant in most of his career, and also as a contractor. And my experience is, going on 23 years now. 23 years, I know. 23 years only doing water, wastewater projects as a consultant and as an engineer in the district side. And Rob's been on the municipal side since '98.
Oh gosh, really?
Since '98, yeah. So what we do when we look at jobs as they come across the board is we look at three factors. The first thing I look at is, do we have the expertise to do this job in house? And if we do, it's a yes. Then I look at, can we do it for a more cost-effective manner to our ratepayers than going out and outsourcing? If that's a yes, and this is the third part, and this third part is where it usually becomes a no, is do we have the capacity? Because Jason has a staff of 2 below him, so and it's not much, and Rob is the only engineer in his group.
Mhm.
So it's not a lot of, but just having more staff is not necessarily the answer too. So there's an appropriate amount. So usually it's yes, yes, and then no. Now when we get into stuff like solar, groundwater, the building, locker room expansion, we need consultants because we don't answer yes on that first one. We don't have the expertise in house to do that. So what we did is I had Jason, and if you don't mind handing out that spreadsheet. I had Jason look at some of our contracts because I already knew the answer, but I wanted to show you guys on paper because you talk to consultants all the time and you talk about, hey, we could do this job for 5%, we could do this job for 6%, we could do this job for 7%. Let me just kind of walk you through this. The first job is immersed solid force main, fairly sizable job, almost $3 million budget. The construction contract was 2.25, almost 2.24 million. If you go over and you go over to basically the first area. The first area is all about the MRF and how much the job total expenses were and where we spent the money. If you go next to it where it says staff CM inspection,
Mm-hmm.
from basically notice to proceed to acceptance, especially percentage of job cost was 5.3%. We did it in-house. We inspected it, CM did it in-house. This is a linear job. This is what 80% of our jobs are. That's from a construction value wise. Total percentage of construction cost was 6% of total construction cost. And on that job, we had very little to no change orders because we actively manage our jobs from day one to end. We don't just trust the contractor, don't trust the consultant. Most consultants do good work, but they don't have the authority to make the decisions that the owner has to do it. And as an owner, you either read and know what you're signing, or you just trust the consultant blindly. And if you do that and something goes wrong, it's on your shoulders. So we actually review all the submittals. We know what's going on in the job, because most change orders happen on jobs because of lack of proactive management. In other words, problems not identified when it could have been identified. Something happened, the contractor actually went in there and built something that was wrong and then discovered it. But if you proactively manage the job, you can see something's coming up, you can negotiate with the contractor and have a small change or a credit, depending on what the solution is, prior to the contractor actually spending the time working on that job. Next job is another linear job, San Marcos Interceptor 1. It's a little bit bigger job, but really not much. I mean, we're going from 3 million to 5 million. It's all relative. But if you look at this, we had outside CM services. We didn't have the capacity to do this. Okay, and we were also tunneling underneath houses and stuff, so it's a little bit more complicated. So percentage of the job was 6.3%. Percentage of the construction contract was 8%. Okay, and this wasn't even full construction management, because even with that, we still had to spend basically 2.7 of the job, or 3.4% of the construction contract. If you look at staff and overhead, we still had to spend $200,000 managing both the consultant and managing the construction project. So when a consultant says we could do it for 5-6%, it doesn't take away the fact that somebody still has to manage the job, somebody has to manage the consultant. It's not a magic pill. So at the end, the total percentage of the job was 9%, but the total percentage of the construction contract, which is the basis of what people budget on, was 11% for that job. It's a little bit more complicated job. So if we did this in-house, we would not have been at 6%. We would have been somewhere between 7 and 8% in-house because of just the complexity of it. But it still shows you the difference in doing things in-house compared to not. If we had the capacity to do it, we'd do more things in-house actually. And then the next job is definitely something that we felt that we need to go out. This is our pump station. Pump stations are significantly more complicated to build and manage than a linear job like a pipeline. There's a lot of mechanical, electrical components, a lot of moving parts, so to speak. So we got outside CM on this one. You can see the outside CM was 11% of the construction contract. Okay, but we still spent 7% of the construction contract on this job. Now, outside CMs, if you give them all, they're going to be somewhere between 15 and 20%. That's if you just say, I don't want to look at anything, and you're going to trust them 100%. So we still came in at 18% because we took on some of that burden ourselves and didn't say just do every single piece of it. So when we look at jobs, that's kind of what we do as staff. And that's really what my job is, right? My job is the resource allocation and assignment of work. So, you know, if I let Jason do everything, he'd probably say, I want to do everything in-house, and I know I can't let him do that. Even though he'd do a great job doing so based on his current track record, his track record won't look as good if I let him do that. So I want
I
to
accept that.
Yeah. So basically, so we have consultants, and we've been using a lot of consultants, even in a lot of in-house design jobs. So when you see the numbers, I want you to have an understanding that when you get a consultant on board, they could do a lot of things for us, and we use consultants all the time, but it doesn't take care of every little thing, and you don't want to be, and what I did last Thursday and Friday is I made a bunch of phone calls just to double check with the cities around us and some of the other public agencies around us. The city guys are telling me that if they're between 9 and 10%, they're heroes. I mean, it's like they get data boys. We're sitting at 1.78%, and our 12-year average is 2 point, what is it?
Yeah, it's under 4.
Under 4, 3 point something. The agency guys from the other water agencies, they're sitting, they said somewhere between 6 and 8% is where they're sitting. So, and they're still spending significant amount of staff time on it. So I just want this is the decision we make, and it's definitely not in a vacuum. We would do more jobs in-house if we could, but we can't. Mm-hmm. And adding more staff doesn't actually solve that problem. It's a balance, and what we do is maintain the balance because we have busy times and we have lulls. So Jason just went through a year and a half of a lot of design efforts, and now we're going to see more construction efforts in the next 2-3 years, and then it'll ebb and flow, and then we'll see an increase in the amount of consultants that we need, and then it'll go back down. So there's definitely a balancing act and a forecasting that we do in our budget, and then obviously as reality hits on what's going on in the environment, we have to make adjustments. So if there's any question on why or how we decide to do a job in-house, again, I just want to be clear. Our first thing that we have to answer, that I have to be comfortable with, is do we have the expertise in-house? The second thing is can we do a better deal for the ratepayers? Is it cheaper for us to do it? Because I can show you math on almost every single job. It's cheaper for us to do it. But then the third thing is we just don't have the capacity.
Yeah.
So if there's any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer. If you come up with questions later, you can always let general manager know that I'd be happy to address that.
You know, as we move forward, and we'll talk a little bit more about it under item 5, but our future is gonna be a lot of pipeline replacements, and that's gonna fall more into our bread and butter, where we have the expertise, but it's gonna swamp us from a capacity issue.
Yeah.
And this is not a first pitch to say we need more people, because that's not where we're going right now, but as we start to transition to that built-out agency and more replacements, we're gonna have that conversation
That
about
kind of
what's the
balance
best
and
way to
pacing,
deliver these
yeah.
projects.
All right, before we move on, we do have one request to speak for item number 1. Mike?
Yeah, I just had a question on the reimbursement aspect. A lot of our CIPs are for adding capacity as well as replacing old lines. And I was wondering how we compute and bill new development
Sure.
for the capacity that has been done before.
Sure, every single project, if I may, so every single project is calculated. So if you're replacing an 8-inch pipe with an 8-inch pipe, it's still a CIP, but 100% of that is coming from existing repairs. But
That's
if you're,
maintenance, yeah.
but if you, well, replacement, yes. If you're replacing an 8-inch pipe with a larger diameter pipe, we calculate the capacity difference, the volume that it can handle difference, and that is prorated equally. So if it's a 50-50, it's a 50-50, for example. And it's based on the actual volume calculation of the pipe. So in other words, a real simple one, if you put in a
I
pipe.
understand what you're saying.
Yeah, okay.
I just have a question is what is the mechanics of billing and getting repaid for that added
It comes
capacity?
out, we have 2 separate funds, basically enterprise funds. It basically comes out of the appropriate fund. So when the accounting department basically pays for it, it goes out of the proper ledger. So in other words, if it's a 50-50 job, it's a $1 million job, $500,000 came out of users, $500,000 that came out of the capacity
Yeah.
funds. So,
So it's the accounting that's up, that has to bill,
pay.
it has to pay.
The
Who
billing, I think
bills?
Mike is referring to, how does the contractor pay for his half? And I think it's prior to his getting his plan approved, is that right?
No, I believe he's asking when a job gets paid for, and part of it's developer money and part of it's user money, how does it get allocated?
Well, no, that's not quite.
Okay, what, I'm
If
sorry.
you build the 12-inch pipe, you
Yep.
got an 8-inch,
Mhm.
yeah, the calculations of the extra capacity is straightforward.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So if a new development comes in and utilizes a portion of that line, the question I have is, well, what is the process for getting that money paid back? Is
From the developer.
it count as capacity fees?
Yes, it comes from capacity, it all comes from capacity fees.
Yeah, so
Okay.
the fee study that we're undergoing right now, it does exactly what we're talking about here. It finds out how much is gonna be capacity increasing versus just replacement. It helps determine what the fee shall be. They pay their fee, it goes into a pool of money,
Right.
and that pool is what we draw from
Right.
partly for the.
Okay,
So the
so there
exist-
is going to be some bill attached in one way or another to a new development for all these different capacities.
Yeah, the existing master plan and the existing capacity fees takes in any increase in sizes, any capacity job, or, so it's prorated for the capacity portion, and adds it to the fee, including financing costs and everything else, as you may recall from going through those
Okay.
workshops years ago. Same exact thing, so basically every developer is paying for any capacity increase fee that's within our master plan.
Okay, is that a single bill or is that
No, it's
multiple
paid
bills?
through cap fees.
He pays his cap fee and then he's done.
So there's one bill in the cap fees which puts all these charges together.
Yep.
Okay.
Can I add on to
And
that
I
a
had
little
one
bit?
last,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
If I can add on to that there, so let's say you have 10 single-family dwelling units coming in as part of the development, they'll pay 10 times the capital facility fee for that. In addition, if there's other project-specific developments
Mhm.
or increases or capacity upgrades that are needed, for instance, they have a 6-inch water pipeline that needs to be upsized to an 8-inch water pipeline due to their fire flow, that development is solely responsible for that upgrade.
Yeah, that's
as
a good
well.
point. So that's only for stuff that's in our master plan. Anything that's for the developer specific, they pay their cap fees and they have to build their infrastructure.
or pay for you build it, us building it.
Or pay for us building it potentially, some
Yeah.
type of agreement.
Yeah,
Typically
but 99% of the time they pay for the cafes and they build their own infrastructure. So any major developer does that. So San Mateo Hills or
Yeah.
that's what they did, for example.
Okay, one last question on the Interceptor. Is that the one that goes down San Marcos Boulevard?
It parallels San Marcos Boulevard for majority.
And that's
of the
part
way.
of the Creekside constant redesign?
It's
It runs through the project.
it's through their project. It's completely separated from the Creek District, but
Mhm.
it's through their project.
Thank you.
All right, number 2, development project update.
Yeah, this one Rob's gonna start off.
Oh, good.
And
Big sheets.
I'm gonna hand these out here. I got a few. It's one
It's a
package.
set,
Oh.
so
Yeah.
just-
You know, one more for you, Dr.
Can
Hernandez.
you get one too?
yeah, well, of course.
Okay.
And Ann got one too.
Can you hand this to
Okay.
Mr. Hunsaker, please? So that he can
Thank you.
follow along as well. And I'm gonna bring out the big map here, so let me know if you want me to throw it that way or just leave it here, because I'll go off this guy.
Appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Great, so you-
So, Mr. Hubbard has talked about how we spend the money, and I'm gonna talk more about how we're making the money.
Good.
Collecting.
Wow.
Thank you, collecting.
I love to spin.
Yeah.
I'm actually gonna
Yin
start
and yang.
on the bottom of page 3 with construction projects.
Well, let's back up because it's been a while since we did this quarterly update. So as you guys may recall from the other updates for the development, we have it in different categories, and one of them is, why don't you go through what the different categories mean? Rob?
Yeah, so
And they're on this map. They're on your map too. The categories.
they're on the map and they match what you have on your spreadsheet. It's just in reverse order. So on the map here, we start with the construction projects, and then you have the plan check projects, and then all the projects that are in design that we're aware of that could be out there in the future. Not necessarily accepted by the land use agencies per se, but we know that they're out there.
Yeah. And
And then the very last page you'll have in your spreadsheet, which you'll see here, these have already been accepted by the board, just to kind of keep you aware.
And help me out, Rob. These construction projects are basically so this way we have an understanding of knowing what tap fees we're going to collect within the next 0 to 5 year time frame. The next project is more of that 5 to 10 year time frame. I mean, they all intermingle, but as far as kind of what we set up, and then the last one, the planning, some of those may never happen. They're just stuff that they've come in. We know they're out there. Some of it will happen, and as they become reality, they move up the list. So this way, you could see potential, but this is really just what is it when you're kind of guesstimating?
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
projecting.
Yeah, you're just projecting. There's another term that I was looking for, a financial term, but the first two categories are more certain. They're coming in. They're working on it. We're spending money. We're getting reimbursed, and we're collecting cap fees.
So the construction projects these are imminent. We expect to have payment within the next year or two at the outside. And then when you get to plan check, those could be anywhere from 1 to 4 years, let's call it. And those in the planning, usually a bit further out there. But some of them will be 3 to 5 years. Some of these will not come to fruition. They'll kind of go away. So I'll start with the projects that are in construction. So the first one here is in the University District area. This is what they're calling the Block 3. We've got a lot of cute names for these here, like Block C, Block K. This is Block 3. This project it's got about 28 EDUs of water, and it's got 49 EDUs of sewer. All of these have been paid, so we've already received our money for this. They're actually wrapping this one up pretty quick here, and then that'll be coming for board acceptance. Project number 2, you'll see on the spreadsheet it's divided into 2 different parts here. That's the Palomar Vista, formerly known as Executive Ridge. It's the one on the far left-hand side here. This is actually off West San Marcos Boulevard. just on the fringe of our district. So they've got 191 multifamily dwelling units, but they've also got a hotel as part of this. They haven't paid any capacities. They're deferring this till occupancy. But this project, right now they're in punch list. They'll probably be done within the next month or two. And again, it'll be coming before the board for acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
Project 3 is the Montiel, we call it the 6-lot subdivision. So we go to the other side of the map here. This is Montiel just north of Freeway 78. They're coming in with 6 single-family residential. Half of them been paid, half of them are still outstanding. This project is probably still, let's call it 3 or 4 months away, I would expect.
Okay. Or more.
Well, speaking of that, Fitzpatrick Apartments, this is number 4. This is part of the Richmar SPA area. Fitzpatrick came in with 78 multifamily dwelling units plus an additional 2 single-family units on the northern side. They are going through a lot of rock at the moment. We hear it on a daily basis here because you can hear the constant bang, bang, bang from the hammering. But they're making some progress on that. They have not paid any capacity fees yet on that project. They're deferring till occupancy. Still probably going to be a while before they're ready for acceptance though. And then project number 5 is Rancho Coronado, which is on the southern side of our district there off Twin Oaks Valley Road. This was split into 3 different phases for us. They had a phase 1, which was more of the northerly part. They had a phase 2, which is kind of the southerly part. And then what we call the street portion here, which is the backbone infrastructure. So they've paid all of their capacity fees. This project is nearing completion, and the board should expect that pretty soon for acceptance. And then obviously we added to the list High Point, which is our zombie project. Hasn't gone anywhere for over a decade.
Mm-hmm.
The good news is they have paid for all of their capacity fees already, so we're not waiting on those. So that is the construction projects. Any questions before I go to the plan check projects? Plan check projects, I've shown those in red on this map here. I'll start with the San Alejo Town Center. This is on kind of the northeastern quadrant of the town center. They're going to develop this into a 12 multifamily unit plus commercial underneath. So it's a mixed-use development. So they owe us about 12 EDUs in water and about 24 in sewer, which you'll see those starting in plan check though. We're not going to we don't have any capacity fees received for any of these. They're not far enough along yet for that. Old California Restaurant Row, number 8. So they're doing a commercial upgrade here. If you've driven by it on Santa Marcos Boulevard, you've probably seen the carnage as they've taken out the western buildings. They're going to put some new buildings in the back, which are going to require some more EDUs on their part as well. And they're coming along pretty well on that plan check, actually. Palisades Estates here, number 9. That's in the almost very northern part of our district. This is a lot of property, but most of it there is not going to be disturbed. It's going to be dedicated open space, we believe, in the future. This first phase of it, they're only doing 19 single-family dwelling units. They're making noise that they're going to do more in the future, but just to get started, they'll do 19. Green Storage is number 10. So Green Storage is over here off the Interstate 15 on the very eastern part. They're putting in a storage unit here.
No, I'm looking at something.
Oh, thanks. So that's just pure commercial. Obviously, they're not in our wastewater jurisdiction. Just about 4.5 EDs of water should be fine for them. Number 11 is a small development here called Ray Court. So that's That's over on our eastern side of our district. They've got 14 single-family dwelling units that they're proposing for that, and in a little cul-de-sac. And then the number 12 is a Murai development. So this one sisters the San Marcos Highlands development. Murai is proposing 89 single-family dwelling units as part of this development. We just received this plan check a few weeks ago, so it's still, it's pretty new. So we probably will take a few months to get through plan check, and then depending on permitting, etc., it could go into construction sometime later this year.
So you kind of see from the numbers, the in construction, those are cap fees that are going to come in. The ones that are in plan check, those will most likely move forward. Some, depending on what happens with the economy and what happens with their individual projects, could fall off. And then there's a longer list of stuff that's in planning that, you know, some of them will move fast, some of them may never happen. But we keep track of it so we have an understanding of kind of what's out there and what we can expect to see.
And I can get into these if you wanted me to. I'll leave that up to you.
While they're thinking about that, can I ask you a question about that Murai project?
Yes.
There's a significant difference between the water EDUs do and the dwelling units. Is that just a lot of irrigation
Yeah.
plans they have out there?
Yeah, that's probably irrigation out there, because they're gonna have a lot of landscaping.
I moved it for his map.
So, yeah, so for ones that there's a lot more sewer than water, is that like mostly commercial stuff?
Yeah, it might be, if there's commercial components of it, typically,
Like the university one, it's
Yeah,
like twice
yeah.
as much sewer as
Yeah.
water.
yeah, typically we see that,
They have restaurants and stuff going in
Right.
Yeah.
that they're planning on. Also, you'll see that sometime in certain multifamilies because of the way the sewer EDUs are calculated. They're still generating. There's just less outdoor use, but the indoor use difference is not as big in multifamily. So you'll see more deltas in multifamily. The denser the multifamily, the bigger the difference between the water and sewer is because of that. Less outdoor use, more indoor use. I mean, indoor use goes down, but not significantly. People still shower and flush.
just as a note here, we are showing number 29, the newest year development there, as that's, we know it's sort of out there, but sort of isn't at the moment.
So again, Newlands here is not on the current master plan books and not on the proposed master plan books. So they're not really recognized by us in any way at this point.
Okay.
But from a planning perspective, it's 2/3 of the cap fees on the water side and slightly less than that on the
Yeah.
wastewater side.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it represents a lot of money out there.
But you have to remember, we haven't planned for it. So if they were to come in, our water sewer studies would show that they would have to build all their infrastructure, and we'd have to collect cap fees to make some of our existing infrastructure larger.
Right.
And so they would have to build everything they need, and we'd have to use that money. So I never look at, remember, cap fees is a net sum zero game for the district. We're a nonprofit. So whatever we collect, we're spending, and we've got to, and basically when they come in, we'll spend it. We'll
Yeah.
spend it on anything that will basically support to make sure our ratepayers don't have to be burdened by it.
Yep.
All right, Rob, did you have anything more to share on
I
development?
don't there, unless there's any questions I can answer.
No, we do have another speaker, Mr. Vincent.
On the cap fee, if a development starts using more water than they bought EDUs for,
Mm-hmm.
do they have to buy new meters, or just do they get so much capacity per dollar?
It depends. It depends on what their operation is. It depends what they need the water for. In some cases, it can be as easy as they pay the additional capacity fees and they're fine. We found some other uses, however, that they actually need a bigger meter for their additional use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in that case, they'd have to purchase it and have it installed.
Yeah, and the way we work is the meter size and the capacity don't always match up. They pay the capacity of what they need, and we charge it so that it's appropriate, and we put the appropriate meter size for what makes sense from our operational standpoint,
Yeah.
based on their use type. So, and then we monitor, whether it's through tenant improvements or through our system, if they start overusing, if they overuse more than a certain amount for too long, then we go back for them, they have to pay more cap fees. So it's always basically a,
Yeah, but I'm just wondering, how do you recapture the base fees then? If you allow them just to buy capacity without a meter, and base fees are based on the meter.
So the base fees are based on the meter here. However, we have a capacity charge here on both the water and the wastewater side there.
the base fee is the minimum.
Right.
And it's on a per EDU basis, and it's the equivalent of a 3/4 inch meter as well.
Okay, so the charge is the EDUs of water,
Yes. Yes. Yeah. We'll
but
call
the
them
base
EDUs.
meter, base charge
Mm-hmm.
is based on the meter.
Right. Right.
So in other words, a multifamily unit's more applicable as a comparison. You could have a 2-inch multifamily meter
Yeah.
that has 8 EDUs on it, and you could have a 2-inch multifamily meter that has 12 EDUs charged to it.
Yeah, but there may be 40 in some cases.
EDUs, not units. There's a big difference between units and EDUs. 'Cause-
No, I've said units.
yeah, exactly. There's a big difference between units and EDUs. 40 EDUs is different than 40 units. So it's whatever the equivalent EDUs, that's what's on that meter. So you have a 2-inch multifamily that might have 15 EDUs on it. That may be equivalent to 20-something, 30-something units.
Yeah.
Because a unit, so perfect example is senior housing. They're 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, 2 bedroom, 1 bathroom. It's based on the Uniform Plumbing Code. They use fixture counts, and based on the fixture counts, they come in with a water demand form, and then we check that. So, a unit is not equivalent across the board, and then you could have more of a luxury condominium complex that has 3 pools, a gym, lush landscaping, and all of a sudden their amount of units per meter is going to be less. So basically each one's handled individually based on what they're actually building. So this, like student housing is a very dense, compact setting, and the developers want always us to say, no, it's less EDUs, but we know that students waste a lot of water too, so.
So do you take and determine their water need, what they ask for, and then divide that number to get an EDU, whatever
Yes.
the EDUs are?
Yeah, so we
And
know the
that's-
amount of, so just to say something has 40 units on an 8-inch, on a 2-inch meter is really kind of nonsensical. It's what is the water demand, and that water demand is divided into EDUs based on 500 gallons per
That's
day
what I was gonna
being an
remember,
EDU.
yeah.
Yeah,
500.
so the number of units is really just it can be misused. and
All units
misunderstood.
are not created equal.
Yeah, all
Yeah,
units are
right,
not
yeah,
created.
then you got a drinking fountain, you got a washing machine.
Yeah.
And that's why we have EDUs, because
Yeah.
that's a set number.
That's
there.
right.
And the way it works is the developers have to, well, it's their engineers, they have to follow the Uniform Plumbing Code on
Right, that
fixture
tells you
counts.
the fixture count.
Yeah, and the architects do the same thing, they tell you the fixture counts. So what ends up happening is almost every single developer comes in and says, we disagree with your estimate. They do their fixture counts, and they purchase more EDUs than what we estimate.
Yeah.
So, because the fixture count is very conservative, it assumes that you're running 4 or 5 things at once in a
Mhm.
house.
How do
Yeah.
you treat EDUs for sewer if they're using more water and more sewer?
Well, there's outdoor use, right? So it depends. So if on a lot of commercial places, it's 100% return to sewer. So if they go over, our sewer ordinance allows them us to go charge more cat fees for them. So and that works on
Cat fees,
cat fees. Yeah.
okay.
And that works on and they also pay the user rates too because they're using more. So they pay it on both sides. And that works on multifamilies that have separate irrigation, which is all modern multifamilies, and any commercial or industrial have separate irrigation meters. Anything that has a separate irrigation meter, we have. Everything else, single family unit is basically just a calc. So.
Thank you.
All right, number 3, groundwater update.
James will be handling that one, I believe.
Yeah, and
Good.
Rob's going to chime in just on this one also because Rob's working with me on this. So just as a reminder, we went forward, the board awarded the groundwater, and really, and I'll let Rob get into what the 3 doors are. What we've done is, and what we're getting for the study is we're really looking at 3 different doors that Vallecitos Water District could go through in the future as far as how to utilize the groundwater. And Rob, I won't steal your thunder. You can talk about those 3 different options. But in essence, what we're looking at with each option is how much infrastructure would we have to build to actually utilize this water in that way? What's the cost of that? How long will it take? The board elected to take the legal options, see what legal hurdles will it take. So at the end of the day, we're hoping this study will give the board, hey, you could use it these 3 different ways. This is a 5-year process, this is an 8-year process, this is a 20-year process, whatever it is. You're going to have to outlay X amount of millions of dollars with grant funding, without grant funding. Here's the cost per acre foot range with grant funding, without grant funding in today's dollars. Rob, with that, why don't you go into those 3 kind of ideas, and then I'll kind of take it from there.
Yeah, so really we've got the 3 options consist of, one's the non-potable option here, which is we'd be using it for irrigation water, for instance here. We could use the groundwater basin there as kind of the storage. We could potentially blend it also for other non-potable uses. The second option is the potable option, which is we stick a groundwater desalter somewhere in our district here. We take the groundwater out, we put it through the desalter to create potable water, get into our system. And then the third option here, this is the more involved one where we get Encina involved. I like to call this kind of the Orange County model, where Encina would provide the advanced treated water, we'd inject it into the basin for a basin recharge. And then that could potentially get added in with one of the first 2 options as well.
So those are your 3 doors, and with that, we're hoping to get timing, relative cost per acre foot, so this way the board could look at this and kind of make a decision, kind of go, no go, what makes sense, move forward, because the next options beyond the study to move forward is a significant expense. With that, Rob, will you give an update of where we are today?
Rob, one quick question. Do the first 2 options consist solely of just natural recharge?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That's
Just to clarify.
That's just good clarification there. It's not projecting like, for instance, what option 3 is, where we get additional supplement from an outside source.
And I believe based on the Todd engineering study, you're looking at about a 2 mg. It says 1 to 2 mgd. We're assuming a 2 mgd. It's on the higher end, but we're going to make that assumption. But I think Woodward and Kern's going to give a range 1 to 2 mgd. So.
And then real quick, what this study is going to do, just to kind of recap here, is it's going to evaluate the infrastructure needed for all 3 of these options. It's also going to provide like a cursory legal review of the groundwater rights in the basin here. It'll look into adjudication, make sure I pronounce that properly. It's going to look at the feasibility level costs for all of these options here. Like James was saying, it's going to provide a range here. And it's going to also identify potential funding opportunities. So if there's grant funding that's available, for instance, that'll definitely be in the range of the cost that it gives.
That feasibility, is that the feasibility portion of the project, or is that the feasibility of the whole project?
That's for we're going to do this for each of the different
But each one,
alternatives.
but the whole project, not
Right.
just the design phase?
No, the
No,
whole
no,
thing.
that's-
It's to actually
it'll
get
get the whole
water.
thing.
Yeah,
Get
okay.
what's the
Mhm.
feasibility
Yeah.
getting the whole thing? What
Okay.
are your obstacles?
Yeah, okay.
Both legal, physical, and monetary.
Okay.
So
So our contract with Woodard and Curran is for about $77,590. Where we stand right now is they've made a data request to us a few weeks ago. I've got almost all that information back to them. There's just one piece of information that I'm missing. But based on what they have right now, they should be ready to commence their options evaluation
Yep.
and get going on it.
So we already had the kickoff meeting. They
Yep.
made the data request. Rob's gotten pretty much 90% of it over to him, and then we're hoping basically next month they could start actually churning work. Not that we'll have results next month, but they can actually start churning work next month.
And when's the anticipated delivery of the study?
I don't recall.
I think we're looking sometime in like the summer, like maybe the early summer time frame.
All right.
Yeah, they shouldn't take too long.
Yeah,
We'll,
maybe-
and we'll
maybe-
get something drafted before then too.
So maybe December. Just kidding. Just kidding.
So we could probably come back in 2 or 3 months to this
Yeah.
committee and give you another
Give us an
update.
update.
We,
Yeah.
we anticipate giving
Yeah.
you at least an update quarterly until we're
Mhm.
actually ready to go to show you something. At least
Okay.
give you a brief update.
All right. Number 4, the solar update. Ooh.
Yeah, so this project is actually well underway. So we've picked 2 of the 3 sites to move forward with. The floating solar at Mar is problematic. We're not ditching it, but we need to get a partner involved. We haven't had a chance to really sit down with Livingston through the holidays to it. I think General Manager Prum and I are still anticipate doing that sooner or later, along with a few other things that we have to settle between the agencies. But we're going to move one RFP with the Twin Oaks, which is a 2 megawatt system, I believe, and then the actual net metering project at LS1. Those are the 2 projects moving forward at this point. But we did run into a snafu. We have to do CEQA on the projects. So that's going to delay the project timeline. So we have the RFP ready to go. Jason's actually reviewing it now, but however, we're getting BRG's our SQL consultant that we have on our as needed. Rob contacted them last week to get a scope and fee. We're hoping in the next week or 2 we'll get a scope and fee. We anticipate it might be over $50,000, so we'll have to come back to the board probably in February to award that contract and move forward for M&D for both projects. I don't anticipate any problems, but the CEQA is going to be necessary depending on now the project outcome. We know what we're doing on each of those projects. The CEQA is not part of, they're not a CEQA consultant, it's not part of their scope. So
Was that a state requirement or a city requirement or just
it's
solar
it's-
requirement?
It's CEQA.
Oh, for CEQA?
State.
Yeah.
That's it.
Who,
Yeah,
I mean, who?
It's state.
It's
CEQA,
state.
It's environmental requirement. I mean, we could, basically looking at what the project you're going to build, it's gotten big enough now that it makes sense that you go out and cover yourselves with CEQA, allow the community to get involved, allow the community to comment on it. Anybody who wants to challenge it. If not, you leave yourself open to challenging that could kill the project, when you have a developer on board.
What's the difference between that and doing a mitigated negative deck?
And
Same
it's-
thing.
It's,
Well, that's the same
Yeah,
thing?
that-
Yeah.
yeah, just for the purpose of the minutes, James mentioned MND before, and that's what
Oh,
MND
okay.
stands for.
Yeah.
so there's different types of documentation that
Right.
satisfy
Familiar with
CEQA.
those.
You can either get an exemption, you can do like a negative declaration where basically that says
Yeah.
we're not declaring any impacts,
Mm-hmm.
all the way up to you have to do a full environmental
Yeah.
impact report, which you're anticipating impacts that could be significant
Yeah.
and you're not able to mitigate
And you're looking at
them.
options. Yep. We anticipate this is going to be a mitigating negative deck, an M&D.
Yeah.
And the CEQA is just the state process
Yeah.
of the environmental process. So,
Mhm.
so
Excuse me, the Twin Oaks one, that's the remote net meter.
that's the resident project.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm. Yep.
And then the Ellis one was just straight.
And them. Yep.
Straight net meter.
hmm And then the floating solar was going to be another remote net radar or resident project, but it may not work out. So, but we didn't want to hold up all 3 jobs because of that. In other words, if we went out with Mar in the future, we'd probably go out with a partner, and it'd be structured different. But then we'd probably have to give an amendment to our consultant to go out because now they're putting 2 different packages together. But we'd have a partner involved, and it'd change the mathematics in the payback for us. So.
Mm-hmm.
So it made sense to not hostage the other 2 projects with this one. So this one, when you get another agency involved, it adds time and complication. So So that's pretty much it. You know, with with the solar project, we're well underway, and we anticipate probably coming to the board. I'm hoping second meeting in February with a consultant award for doing a mitigated negative deck.
All right. We have a speaker, Mr.
Yeah.
Hunsaker.
There's been a lawsuit, as you're probably aware, on the county on the cap and trade fees, and make sure that any mitigation features is local. And this would appear to be one project that would be ideal for being paid for out of cap and trade fees. It is local, it is solar, and it should be done, I think, and should be paid for accordingly. If we're going to have anything that's meaningful in mitigation, this is one of them, and if there's any good use of local money, this is it as well. I do want to suggest that we order for our district replacement parts. We had that debacle with the inverter from China. So maybe with the tariffs coming in, maybe some spare parts would be appropriate, especially inverters. And I'm still a heavy advocate of batteries. I know you've added the capability of adding them.
Actually, the batteries are in the solar project. They could these solar developers can bid it both ways, and the district could look at the payback scenarios on both those to figure out what would be more advantageous.
Again, the batteries would be a good cap and fee mitigation feature as well. And keep in mind, in Sempra, they are building some additional fossil fuel plants, and they're peaking plants, which are used for off solar production hours and off solar production days. So Sempra is figuring on, our pure solar environment isn't going to exist for decades, but we will potentially be paying peak fees, increased peak fees because of all this, and Sempra is building for that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, number 5.
Okay, condition assessment update. So this is really two subjects in one. First, I want to talk about our overall asset management. So the district is starting down a road of doing full asset management, and really there's 3 legs to that stool. There's the computer maintenance and management system, which has been in place at Vallecitos District and utilized primarily by all of operations for many years and successfully. And that's really what drives our workload, our work order, the tracking, and everything that we do, our CMMS, our computer maintenance and management system. The second leg of that stool really is our assessment, pipeline assessment. Now, on the sewer side, because of basic regulatory reasons, we've been doing it very well for many years, which is videoing our sewer systems. Every sewer, just about every sewer, gets a video camera in it roughly every 2 years or so. And so we meet or beat the expectations of our waste discharge permit. And the third portion of that, another portion with this, and it's a water pipelines. Now, it's not easy to stick a video camera inside of a water pipeline. So I'm going to be talking more specifically about that. And then, of course, the third portion of the stool itself is the full asset management. That's putting together all the information that we're collecting in our computer maintenance management system, looking at condition assessments from both the from the sewer side, and now we're going to be looking at water side, which is what we're embarking on, and putting together an asset management plan that not only is a operational and engineering tool, but it is also a financial tool and a very important tool that will affect the board, because it kind of shows you what potentially you'll have to replace and have in your reserves over the lifetime of the assets that we have in the ground. So we have somewhere between, I don't know what the number is, 500 to 600 million plus assets at Vallecitos Water District. And if the assets have anywhere from as low as a 10 to 15 year in some sewer facilities to as high as 100 year But so if you look at a 100-year window, you're replacing every asset once at least, some of those assets multiple times, and we don't have $650 million in the books, and nowhere close to that. So when you're looking at asset management, what you're trying to do is really get a plan together that helps you extend asset life, spend maintenance dollars where it needs to be spent, and basically save the ratepayers money in the long run by making the right decisions. Certain things can be run to failure, certain things you have to replace right away, certain things can be done more efficiently, and this kind of helps tie that all together. So the effort now is really, we haven't started that third leg, the asset management plan, so we're starting that process, but we also have to finish off that second leg, which is the pipeline assessment. So there's two things that staff is doing right now. One is we have a consultant on board to start both the ductile iron and steel pipeline assessments. With the ductile iron, as the board is well aware of, we've had several premature ductile iron failures. So we're looking at all that data and figuring out what type of pipe assessment tool to put in the ground and coming out with an implementation plan. This is something that we're going to, it's an ongoing thing. So every year we're going to do, I don't know what the number is, but let's say 2 miles of pipe or a mile pipe every year. Well, we have, I don't know how many hundreds of miles of ductile iron. So it's going to be one of those things where we prioritize it and start in an area, finish that area, assess it, and based on the assessment, either create emergency repair work, schedule repair, or actually none of it should be emergency, but basically schedule repair work or group them in group projects in the future and make it a CIP. The idea is getting ahead of those emergency breaks. So if we schedule the work and get it done, it'll save the district and its ratepayers money over time. We're not going to capture everything, but over time, when I say time, we're talking decades, you should see less and less and less breaks to the point where, you know, we're being proactive. The steel pipeline, we don't have a lot of steel pipeline infrastructure. So we're looking at basically our two most critical steel pipeline infrastructures, which is from the aqueduct in Escondido into the heart of our use area, right here, you know, basically downtown, and then the pipeline that brings water from our Twin Oaks tanks all the way up to North Vista. So those are our two critical pipelines that don't have redundant systems to move water around. So we're going to go ahead and actually put pipe tools in that and start doing those pipes section by section. And they're also, for us, larger diameter, 12, 14, 16, 18, so on and so forth. So we're going to be looking, that's the one from Escondido that Jason has.
Do you know how much is welded steel versus wire wrap pre-stressed?
Most of it is circumferentially wrapped steel, so it's basically screw pipe. So it's the rebar reinforced pipe. Most of it, it's older. There's some tar wrap steel too that we have, that we inherited from the old farmers back in the day. So some of that pipe actually predates the existence of Vallecitos Water District.
So we have all that data for every lineal foot, and hopefully it's accurate, and we
Yep.
know what the records show, but
Mm-hmm.
we assume
So-
it matches what's in the field.
So there's sections that you'll see in the budget that we're going to be replacing because we know it's Swiss cheese from previous breaks. There's section that we're going to be assessing because to replace this pipe, and can you show the Tres Amigos pipe also, the one that goes
Yeah.
up to Vista? There. To replace this pipe and these pipe, we're talking, I forget what the budget amounts are, Jason.
Yeah, and here's just a blow up of some of those maps if that helps you.
Yeah. So just to give you an idea of the potential of asset management and pipeline condition assessment, those two pipes replacement, I thought one was 6 million, the other one was 8 million. I could be wrong, but we're talking, it's over 10 million to replace those pipes. Yeah, it's over 10 million to replace those two pipes in its entirety. Based on just the age alone and the fact that we've had breaks in those pipes, they don't warrant replacement. But if we go in there and we put a tool in there and we find out that 80% of that pipe is good, we just saved,
Yeah.
almost 8 figures. So you're looking at huge potential savings. So we're going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars up front in the hopes of saving millions of dollars on the back end. And that's basically the whole premise of condition assessment and pipeline and asset management.
And how do you assess these pipes that are water pipes?
So there's several different tools and technologies in there. We're actually moving forward. Bless you.
Excuse me.
we're actually moving forward with a couple different technologies. Our consultant's going to evaluate how good they work for the different type of pipes and soil conditions. That's why this is one of those things that it's not in our wheelhouse. So we had to get a consultant to help us out on this.
Small fish.
Yeah, very smart
Well, it
fish.
is. It's one's called a pipe snake, you know. The other one's called a smart ball that they put into the pipe. So for the ductile iron, there's ones that fit into the fire hydrant. You basically shut the pipe off. You take the fire hydrant off. You put it into the fire hydrant. You make that 90. You go into the pipe, and then it basically takes an it's called magnetic flux. But every time I say that, I think of Back to the Future.
Yeah.
So, but it actually basically takes an MRI essentially inside the pipe. And
Yeah.
it gives you steel thickness, where you can see areas of different holes or different dips, or if there's less steel, you could tell. And it gives you a high resolution, foot by foot outcome. There's other ones that just give you what's going on inside the pipe. So depending on the pipe and the type of corrosion we see, we're going to use different tools. We're more interested in that X-ray, MRI type tool because most of our corrosion is from outside in. So if it's not corroded on the inside and looks perfect, a tool that doesn't give us that metal density doesn't help us.
And that's the drawback of our sewer system. When we go and do the CCTV in the sewers, all we're seeing is a picture of the inside of the
Yeah.
pipe, which may or may not be an indicator of how
Yeah.
structural.
So,
integrity.
just these two pipes alone, we're going to be spending, and I forgot what the contract is only for like 50,000, but then we'll be coming back to the board.
Yes.
We'll be coming back to the board when we figure out what pipe tool to put in, and it's going to be probably several $100,000. And over the years of doing it, we're not going to do it all in one shot. We're going to spend several $100,000. But since we're looking at over $10 million, maybe close to $14 or $15 million in pipe replacement costs, if we cut that number down to $4 or $5 million, we just saved, close to $10 million. Now, obviously, if you put the pipe tool in and the whole pipe is bad, then at least we know we're replacing bad with good instead of replacing good with good.
Right,
That's the key.
and the liner that we put in the pipes just here months ago,
Yeah,
I mean, that's a potential solution.
Sure.
Yeah.
sure. That's a potential for some of the pipes, yes,
Yeah.
not all of them. And what we'll do is when we start, and so the workflow idea is we have assessments done every year on ductile iron. We do our steel assessments as we need to. We collect the data. We have our computer maintenance management system all in one program, Maximo. And then our asset management team will basically look at that data and spit out work. This needs to be done in the next 6 months. This needs to be done in the next 2-3 years. And then we'll group projects together. So this way Jason will get a grouping of projects that has to be done within the next 2-3 years. And we'll bid it out, make it a sizable package to get some economy of scale, which will save the district money, and bid it out. Other projects that are, hey, it's imminent, this pipe has a hole in it, and it's leaking, it's gonna start creating real damage. Can we handle it with our staff, or if we can't handle it with our construction crew, then we get a contractor on board right away and we do that repair work.
So getting the data is one piece of it, and that takes money and time, but once you get the data, that's when the hard part begins. So if you do this assessment that says, hey, you only have half the thickness of the original pipe, does that mean it's time to replace it? How about if it's a quarter of the thickness?
Yeah.
So that's the art of it, trying to figure out how, it's all about maximizing the value of the asset you have in the ground.
Sure.
You don't want to run certain lines to failure, but you want to run them as long as you can before you replace the pipe.
So I anticipate there'll be plenty of times where it says, we recommend redoing this pipeline assessment in 2 years or next year, because you want to get a rate of degradation.
Right.
And maybe some soil tests on the outside to see what the corrosivity of the soil is. And from there, you're working with our cathodic protection engineers and in-house staff, and we could probably start putting together a picture. And there's going to be learning curves in the beginning.
So what about the ones that we've had, these recent catastrophic, like Twin Oaks,
Yeah.
the wire wrapped,
Well,
and then the one in San Marcos Boulevard, I think?
Yeah, so both of those, though, were human error. I mean, they're both old pipes, but
Right.
they're both human error. So the one on Twin Oaks was an abandonment that wasn't, so it was a weld coupling that didn't have a full wrap on it. They just put the weld right on the edge. So they basically cut the pipe, they cut the rebar, the reinforcement of the pipe,
Yeah,
they
tack
welded.
back the
They tacked back
wire.
and they just tacked it back on. It wasn't a full wrap, and it corroded right there. The other one was.
But I mean, at the same time, were you able to assess the condition of the rest of the pipe? I mean,
we weren't able to get pipe
yeah,
tone
so
in
see, I'm
time.
worried about those
Yeah.
real old lines that may
Yeah.
let loose
Well-
somewhere else.
Well, these lines are older, and
Yeah.
and they're more critical. Those lines, like for example, that line, if we have to shut it down, it doesn't affect people.
Well, yeah, there's critical and there's causing disruption
Yeah.
too. I mean, I think a look to see a combination of the two. What's critical and or what is going to create
Failure
Traffic
mechanism, failure cause. Yeah,
disruption,
Yeah.
consequence.
a consequence. Yeah.
And the one under San Marcos Boulevard, basically what we did was there was a fairly long, I forgot what was it, 12 feet, 20-foot dead end.
Yeah,
So
20
basically
feet.
it's about 20-foot dead end. The water flows down San Marcos and down Rancho Santa Fe, and it was a T and it was cut off at the valve when Carlsbad put their line in, the 30-inch line in, and severed it, and it was cut off. So there's about a 20-foot dead end, and that dead end was actually at a high point. So there was air, and it was just a dead end. And so what we did is we cut it all the way back, basically to that 90. So now there's no more dead end. So we spent a little extra time since we were in there to make sure we wouldn't have another failure. But who's to say there's not more
Right.
out there? And we understand. So what we're going to do is we're going to start on these pipelines, and then we're going to end up doing all of our steel pipelines over time. But we don't have the capacity to do it all at once, or the budget, to be honest, to do it all at
Yeah.
once.
So yeah, I think we should keep in mind consequence
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
system redundancy.
And that's part of the asset management plan is you're looking at failure mechanism, failure consequence, failure type, and then you start prioritizing things. So we have we're hoping to get a consultant on board, basically February, March, to help us with the asset management process. This consultant, that's what they do. That's almost exclusively what they do for other clients, and they could help us form together a scope and help us. We kind of have a vision of where we are and where we want to be. They'll help us fill in. These are steps you need
It's
to
a
take. to get
they're
there.
putting a strategy together
Yeah.
for us,
Yeah.
basically.
Mhm.
Okay.
So and so the board, the committee and the board will be seeing kind of this action, and this is kind of the overview of where we're going with it. And then so right now, as Jason, for both the ductile iron and the steel pipeline schedule, where are we on those? I know we had the kickoff.
Yeah, so we had the kickoff with our consultant last month, and we're sort of still in the data gathering phase of those projects, and they're looking at the steel information, and then also a ductile. So they're kind of looking at the end of the day, we're going to have a plan for each of those, how we want to move forward. Then we'll go to those next stages. But right now, we're just at the infancy of the project.
So the board and the committee first, most likely, will, depending on time, it may go straight to the board, but I anticipate the board and the committee will get information on, hey, this is what we're going to do now. This is the pipeline tool we want to put in, and it costs X amount of dollars. And then I'm guessing it's going to be over 50, so we'll have to go to the board. So, but this is where it's coming from with this goal in mind.
Okay. Very good. Well then, last item is public comment, and Mr. Hunsaker has it.
Yeah. At the recent finance committee meeting, learned that we lost months of desal water in Poseidon. And Poseidon water has been extremely expensive in any case. There's also some plans afoot to do some more desal using wastewater. And I know there's a plant in Yuma, a pilot plant the feds did, and they came up with about $300 per acre foot cost to desal there. And what's happening is the Colorado River water, while it's pretty saline, is still a lot less salty than the sea, and it's a heck of a lot cheaper to do river water desalinization than it is briny sea.
intermittent to that is the wastewater treatment. Like using treated wastewater like we have out of Metal Arc and desal it. And if a small pilot plant can get fairly good prices, seems like VWD should be considering doing some desal on its own and not necessarily rely on Liebenhain or someone else to do the work if we have the water. That said, desal from the ocean is a lot more reliable, potentially, than wastewater, because wastewater, if we cut back from the Colorado River water, we're gonna have less water, and as the drought continues, we're gonna have less rainwater intrusion, both of which reduce desal costs. So I think, considering the fact that we're losing slowly our Colorado River water, that a little advanced work is in order. Storage is gonna be a big issue. But Poseidon doesn't seem to be as reliable, and I think there are some design deficiencies with regard to bacteria infestations that needs to be investigated even further. As far as one other little point on the cap asset management, we're a fairly young community, and this is an appropriate time to put a good asset plan in place. I think it should be tied in with finance and part of the depreciation expenses that should be charged off in one way or another appropriately. Especially when you have a new development coming into an older line, there should be some depreciation consideration in that line as well as just the capacity. But I also look at the city of San Diego, which has got some piping that's over 100 years old and is breaking all over the place. And the avoidance of capital asset management is a big issue. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could make just a real quick
Yeah.
comment on what Mr. Hunsaker said. James spent a lot of time talking about the physical act of what would we do with the information, and we would replace pipes and we would do whatever. But it's a huge financial tool for us too, and that's gonna be the biggest benefit to us. It's gonna tell us how much money should we be putting aside based on what we know the condition of the assets are like.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we don't know what to do with that yet, because we don't have the data, but it'll be, the financial side is every bit as important as the physical replacement side.
I threw out that $650 million note.
Well,
Big number.
Yeah, it may be a case of prioritizing limited funds.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Well, and that
It's
was one
going
of the
to-
things they mentioned at CASA, that the big push is to try and see if they can get some kind of big infrastructure bill
Yeah.
put together somewhere that maybe we could get grants out of or to help us.
The time for us is now. We're a young district and our assets are fairly young, but they are aging, and we want to have a plan in place and go through our learning curves of how to implement that plan before our infrastructure is already old and need replacement.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's,
That's the smart thing.
it's wise to learn from the experience of San Diego just
Yeah.
ourselves. They haven't been proactive, so.
Very good.
Okay, I think that's all
Anything
we
else
have.
from the group?
Nope.
Let's go home. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, guys.